And we are live here to chat about mostly this week's finale episode of The Flash, but also Hawkeye, also some actually good quality movies coming out apparently that we're going to hear about, and what else we watched this week. I'm Cammie. I'm so excited, not because of The Flash. No credit to The Flash. Am I excited? But I am excited because we have two returning guests this week. Say hello to Carey and Kate and weird background Cammie.
Hi.
Carey and Kate, thank
Hello,
you.
everyone. Happy holidays.
Sorry for interrupting. Also, I love the holiday hat that you are donning. That is very festive. That is very appropriate.
Mhm.
This is our last live before the holidays, so we're going to make the most of it. Let me just do a little bit of movie magic here and bring Kate up to talk to us about the news this week. Kate, what should be on our radar?
So, as we have previously established, we're a bit of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans specifically. We really enjoy Elizabeth Henstridge, so I come bearing great news about Elizabeth Henstridge. She is, for the next season of Superman and Lois, going to be directing at least one episode, which I am super excited about. I think she did a fantastic job when she directed on S.H.I.E.L.D., and I cannot wait to see her do it again, especially on a show that I think is surprisingly good. And then she has also her Apple TV series coming out called Suspicion, I believe it is, and that will be out on February 22nd. So that's exciting. I have more licorice pizza news, but we will get to that later in the live tonight. And a reminder that the Hawkeye season finale is next week.
I'm so excited about the Hawkeye season finale, even though I will be traveling to Narnia and unable to go live and debrief with you all. You better believe we're going to debrief about it after the holidays. And I know we're all going to be, live tweeting or post live tweeting Hawkeye. Very excited. There's a couple finales coming up next week. We're also going to have the Wheel of Time finale that I likewise am not going to be able to go live and rant about, but just know the feelings are there right alongside my holiday spirit. I also want to welcome Stormy in the chat. She says, boy, am I ready to go at Flash and those writers. Carey, I believe that is your cue. Let's bring on Carey. Carey, I have a somewhat unique format I want to go through to talk about The Flash tonight. But before I even attempt that, I just want to hear from you, just in general. What did you think about the conclusion of Armageddon?
Here is me being positive, right?
Yes.
There were a number of things that I appreciated about the episode. I don't know if they outweighed the things that disappointed me. If I had to give it, say, and I know you didn't ask for a rating, but say if I was giving it a score out of 5, I'm feeling like a 3, give or
Okay.
take. Yeah, I mean, there were some really great things that they touched on. I just was sort of disappointed in sort of like the heart of the show, primarily like the main cast. All of the things that I really loved about this episode involve people who were not regulars. That's kind of disappointing for the show in general. But as far as the guest folks that we had that I really appreciated, I love them a lot.
Yeah, I think there's a word that you used in one of your tweets right after the episode. You used the word exasperated, and that really resonated with me. I did find myself exasperated at a few points in the episode. But here's what I want to do. I live tweeted the episode. I believe you did too. I know a lot of people did for the first time in this crossover. In fact, you might recall before the crossover even started, I had talked to Kate and I was like, Kate, because I was trying to strong arm her into watching this show. And I was like, I'm going to tweet a thread catching you up on everything that you need to know so that you can watch this without having watched The Flash. And then prior to the finale, I kind of made the bold claim that you missed nothing, which is a bit of an exaggeration, but that you could just jump into this final episode and watch. I noticed a few people were saying, okay, agreed. I love Mia. I'll watch for her. Weaver said, I really want to see this episode, but dread the thought of slogging through, the 10 or so episodes I missed. Paige said, thank you. Tonight's episode is the only one I plan to watch. So that was really interesting to me to see this kind of traffic drum up of people who haven't watched everything up to this point. So before I get into kind of what I was hearing throughout live tweeting, I want to go to you and hear if you hadn't watched the 4 episodes leading up to this, what would be your take on Armageddon?
Ooh. If I hadn't watched any of the episodes before the conclusion, or are you talking about just for the conclusion or just for it in general?
Just this last one, the 4 episodes of Armageddon that preceded this, if you just watched the conclusion, would your rating have gone up or down?
Without watching any of the previous ones, my rating probably would have gone down, because I don't know how you could sort of come into this without having that foundation of what it's supposed to mean. So yeah, my rating would have probably gone down, because I would have been like, well, what's going on here? What are we talking about? I don't know that a whole lot of it would have made narrative or thematic sense if I hadn't seen the first 4.
That makes sense to me. And yet I still kind of stand by this idea that you can jump in having, only seen Arrow, and jump in just for Mia Smoak and kind of get a sense of her storyline. So I want to start with her because she's what I'm most excited about. And then we will get to our Flash characters. Mia Smoak was what I saw all the conversation about the entire time. I think the Flash writers were on the same page because all the promos we saw leading up to this were hyping up Mia. They saved her for the end. And we find out, just as you had suspected, that her mission was to find William. What did you think of her journey throughout the episode?
After watching it, and I don't know if you've seen any of The Mandalorian, but it reminded me a lot of, again, whether you saw it or not, they brought in a character in the second season of The Mandalorian, Ahsoka Tano, who essentially had this mission that she was on to find someone who was important to her, in sort of the same way that Mia had a mission to find someone important to her. And I thought it was sort of like a really good end for her to be in this episode. The takeaway, though, from both of those situations for me is I was much more significantly invested in their story, in terms of where does their story go when they leave this show. And the best thing about in The Mandalorian is that we knew that this character was going to get her limited series, an opportunity to explore that more. With Mia, she's got this mission. It's important to her. She's going to do what she needs to do to get to it, and they tease it, and we don't expect or know that anything's going to come from that. So to me, that's sort of a letdown, unless they say, hey, we've generated enough interest, we're going to give her, whether it's a series or whether it's an opportunity to at least have a limited run, then we get to see that. But to say she's trying to find William, she has this mission, and then sort of just leave it there without any ability to know if we're going to get a chance to see that journey, it felt a bit empty, I must say. Not to say that I didn't enjoy seeing Mia in the episode. It's just that the reason she was there, I want to see more of it, and I don't know that we will. And to me, that was sort of a letdown.
It's like you're reading my mind, or like you're reading my Twitter mentions through my eyes, because you absolutely have your finger on the pulse here. I think it is not at all a knock of Mia's storyline. That was by far the most entertaining point to me. And I know I'm not an unbiased source, but I think if I could try to tap into an unbiased part of me, I would also say that her performance was one of the most like electric, I guess, of this crossover. She comes across very much on screen as an interesting hero, right? But what I started to notice was, yes, everybody was excited to see her, but when it got towards the end of the episode, you see, Audrey made a comment about, we're going to need to rely on fanfic from here. Amanda made a comment saying, she wants to see Felicity and Mia team up. She also would be open to alternate universes where Oliver can make an appearance in sort of a family team up. Nikki says she wants to see Mia going to see Felicity, William, and her 2-year-old self, and seeing baby Mia ready to fight already. There's a lot of people excited about this idea of Mia being able to time travel, and we're just straight up not going to see it because she's not getting a spinoff, despite, the number of spinoffs in this universe. So that's a little frustrating. I'm a little biased, but I thought she was really great. Let's talk about our main Flash cast, though. As much as I don't want to, because Flash is not my main favorites, they are the main piece of this. By the time we get to the end of the crossover, if it wasn't abundantly apparent the entire time, this isn't like an equal crossover. This is the Flash with a few guest appearances. So, what did you think of really their journey throughout, not even just this episode, but where we saw Barry at the beginning, where you liked him and I begrudgingly almost liked him, to where we see him at the end?
Okay, so let's take Barry. Um, and it's interesting that you say journey, sort of like from where we saw him in the first episode to where we saw him at the end. And he feels like it sort of seems like he's in the same place to a degree. And that's not always a knock. I mean, it's sort of like what happens in these kinds of shows. He seems to be in the same place, which is fine because I like where he started. He's probably a little bit more confident in his resolve in terms of knowing sort of what he went through to get to this point. So that's fine and that's fair. As far as the rest of the characters, I really like the moment that Caitlin had with On.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a really good and powerful moment. Um, and strangely enough, I also liked, and I know this is going to be strange, but I also kind of sort of liked the moment that Iris had with Mia. And I probably know why some people might not like it so much. I thought it was fine. Um, Maybe the moments when she was talking about Oliver and sort of his journey, I was like, I know she's going to catch a whole lot of grief for that, but it is what it is. But the the issue that I had overall with the main cast is they do a lot of proclamating, if that's a word. And by that I mean, if you are a hero or if you are doing good things, I think you just do them. However, with what I found with quote unquote Team Flash, and they mentioned Team Flash too much for my liking, I must say,
Agreed.
but they always talk, yeah, but they always talk about either what it means to be a hero or that we are heroes or that we are Team Flash. And I
Mm-hmm.
think if you protest too much or you proclaim too much, I think that sort of takes away from the fact that you shouldn't have to do that. Your actions should be like, hey, we're the freaking heroes here, or this is what we do, and we're such a team without having to say it every freaking 5 seconds. And when you hear that every 5 seconds, it sort of feels like who are you trying to persuade here, or who are you trying to convince that these guys are heroes or they're a team? You shouldn't have to say it that much. And that sort of started grating on me after a while. Um,
I would agree
I
with
didn't know
that.
your thoughts about that.
And I think one of the characters who I really, he's new and I'm old, so I'm prone to not pay attention to new characters, but Chuck has really highlighted that for me. He often, the way they write him is falling into the trap of, they write the techie person and they make him the Cisco, the early era Felicity, where they just try to make everything that he says that comes out of his mouth as funny. But reading between the lines a bit, in the few instances where he has had the opportunity to talk about this idea of pacifism, I found that really interesting in a show like this, where Barry refuses to kill. Now, with Chuck, he's refusing to, create deadly weapons, whatever, because he actually has a philosophical belief behind it. And while I may want to see, you know, I may be interested in a hero like Oliver, who, is willing to be the bad guy for good purposes, just because that's interesting to watch, whether I agree with it or not. Or I might be interested in anti-heroes like Helena, Huntress, or whatever. And I may, we innately, for better for worse, we want to see the action, we want to see the conflicts. We may find as viewers pacifism to be quote unquote boring. We can still, I think, understand that there is a heroic perspective behind that. Not all heroes have the same morals and perspective, but they have to have a moral, a perspective in general. And Barry lacks that. He's not a pacifist by any means, but he will frequently refuse to kill because of what it could do to him. And when boiled down, it's actually selfish because he has killed or caused deaths before. Eddie is the primary example, but certainly it's happened many times since then for reasons where he's not even defending somebody else. He's just trying to selfishly, be satiated emotionally in some way. So I struggle with them constantly trying to tell us that he's a hero when I would be more genuinely interested if he had conflicting morals. We see that a bit with Caitlin, where she is suddenly like, no, we should let Dawn die. And it is coming somewhat from a place of bitterness, and it is coming somewhat from a place of revenge. And I'm just okay with that. You know what I mean? And that may take her away from some sort of righteous end of the scale, but it made her very interesting. Barry doesn't read that way throughout the entirety of this episode, and it just feels like we're just trying to prop him up on a pedestal, but you haven't given him a pedestal. You haven't given him a philosophical or moral perspective of heroism, even in the most base sense, right? Like, I understand this is not an HBO show. It doesn't have to be some sort of advanced philosophy. It just give me a sentence summarizing how he's a hero, and they can't. I do want to
Yeah.
I do want to touch on one piece you brought up because I see Kate and Stormy talking about it in the chat. So I know that Kate has watched this scene, and I'm going to bring her on. Kate, I'm just going to let you float in the sky for this one. This is going to
Oh,
be the
yay. I need a weird background.
There we go. This is going to be the Kate voice floating in the sky. This is the equivalent, Carey, of you and I sitting on the couch watching the show, and Kate being like across the house in the kitchen saying she's not watching, but like hearing and having an opinion anyway. That's the setting here. So
Very
you
much.
talked about Iris saying you shouldn't kill because your dad Oliver killed and it ruined his life. And a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings in response to that. I have opinions you'll be shocked to know. Kate, what are your thoughts?
I watched approximately 3 minutes of the show. I wanted clips of it just for context or anything like that, and just to possibly give it a chance. And one of the first clips I watched was the Iris and Mia conversation. And at first it bothered me, but the more and more I thought about it, the more and more it bothered me because she has always kind of been against Oliver. And it's against Oliver in a very odd way, where
Mm-hmm.
it's not almost like a purely like, where if a citizen or something like that had this very like, you should never kill stance, it's not entirely like that. It's almost more of she sees that Oliver had struggle in his life and correlates that purely to the decisions he's made. And what she doesn't, whenever they have her say these lines, it's almost dismissive of the fact that he was making himself suffer basically as payment for the sins of others. It was a very twisted view of life, and that's like a whole analysis of the entire show in general about like why he thought he had to pay for other people's sins. And of course, he had been a not so terribly great person before the crash, and figuring that part of himself out. And it's very reductive of him as a story. So if you're a person that doesn't know anything about him at all, okay, fine, you get the right to say that because you don't actually know him. But as somebody that may not be his best friend, but you're supposedly the wife of his best friend because we just keep saying that they're best friends and then that makes no sense. Um, it doesn't make sense for her to have such a closed-minded opinion of Oliver and his actions. And in fact, in early days, she was so supportive of the concept of Oliver and of the Green Arrow and everything else. And then when the crossover started and she got to know him as a person, she hated him more and more. And it just boggles the mind. So then when she does a from like season 8,
Kate cut out for me when the video switched. Did she cut
like
out
it
for you?
just was reductive of
Yes.
Oliver as a whole to me.
Kate, you were cutting out
And
just
that's
for
all I
that.
have to say about that.
You were cutting out just for that last sentence there when the video feed switched around. But I think what's interesting is okay, so first of all, you referenced previously Iris wanted to sleep with Oliver. That was the origin. Then she slowly gets to the point where she gets increasingly disdainful. So, in terms of the actual comments, I like on a base sense, especially if you kind of if you don't watch The Flash, in which case, good for you for loving yourself, then it's just going to come across as well, Oliver gave his life for Barry's life, and Barry's wife has decided to blame that on Oliver, which is exactly what it is. And it's really, at the very best, it's tacky. At the very worst, there's just some moral complications that need to be worked out there. But in some sense, I kind of agree with with Carey. I'm okay with Iris saying this because it is at this point in character for her. Because throughout this, she has increasingly, she is as a character, we don't see a lot of consistency because they're very bad at writing her. We don't see a lot of follow through on her character development because they mostly make her prop up Barry. But one of the things that we have got from her is this focus on self efficacy. You must be responsible for your own destiny. You need to be responsible for your own actions. You need to find another way. And for her to say this is incredibly kind of like, whoa, you misunderstood the situation. He just saved everybody's life and literally sacrificed his own. But it is something she has done this far. Let me tell you what my problem is with it, truly. Let's say you're going on to a show that you don't know much about. Just imagine with me. You don't necessarily watch it. You don't necessarily ship the ships, whatever, but you are going to be a character on this show and you want to be liked. It would devastate you to read your script and realize you're going to say this about a beloved dead character to his daughter. You immediately know, even if it's warranted, let's pretend it was warranted. It's not. I disagree with her perspective, but let's pretend it's warranted. That is a fast track to getting hated by fans. And that was Carey's initial comment. It was like, you hear it, and in your mind, you're kind of like, I'm okay with this, but I know fans are going to dislike it. They're consistently putting this woman in a position to be hated. And I just really, really struggle with that at this point because I can't argue with I'm not even an Iris defender by any stretch of the imagination. But I want the best for her in that I want the best for all female characters, and they consistently set her up to be hated, and that's what I struggled. They knew going into this that Mia was going to be the draw. She's what everybody's eyes are gonna be on. She's the, shiny guest character. And you're putting Iris in a position where, previously we got to see her talk to Batwoman. And that was a really fun kind of, conversation where she's talking about getting cold feet. But it was just an interesting, opportunity to play off somebody. It doesn't make Iris look bad. This was such a position where this is the one thing that's going to get quoted about this woman. I can't defend it because it does come across as a bit sociopathic. And they really need to set her up to be better liked, because they're not intending her to be a hated character, but they're making her a hated character.
Agree 100%. I think there was a much better way for her to get her point across to Mia, that you don't have to go down this path of basically murdering people to accomplish your goal. The execution of it was less than spectacular. Is about the best thing that I can say about it. I would be interested to know if, when Candace Patton got this script, if she had any behind the scenes conversations to say, are we sure we want my character to go this route or not? I'd be really interested to know that, because, I mean, obviously, someone who has the agency that she has on the show could have said, you know what, I read this. I don't feel like this is something that Iris would or should or could say. Let's figure out a better way to get the point across without me basically kicking dirt on basically her dead dad, who is the founder of this universe, and we know how this is going to play.
Right.
Um,
Who repeatedly saved everybody's lives, who saved Barry and Iris's lives at their wedding, and it's a pattern at this point. We saw following a previous crossover, the little jab at, oh, they got us a coffee maker that wasn't on our registry right after they had just saved Barry and Iris's lives. You don't write a line for a character like that unless you dislike them. You don't write a line for a character complaining about receiving a wedding gift that wasn't on your registry, whether or not the gifter just saved your life or not. You don't write that unless you dislike them. And I struggle with this because it is effectively, making me grow to dislike the character as much as I don't want to dislike any female character, and I'm going to defend it, blah, blah, blah. You get Stormy in the chat says, Iris comes across as ungrateful and kind of explains why she seems not to really give a care about everything that's done for her. And I struggle with the fact that they're writing her this way, but she's not supposed to be some sort of like villainous nag. She's supposed to be, this wonderful, smart, whatever woman, but they're just putting enough in there to turn people against her. And it's kind of frustrating. It kind of comes off as misogynistic writing, and I don't love that for her. I don't need her to be soft and nurturing to Mia. I don't need her to be, feel good auntie, make her a cup of tea, none of that. She can still be tough love and have a perspective without coming across as mean. So I struggled with that. But I really enjoyed all the scenes that Mia was in, and I did appreciate the effort in getting Mia in scenes with other women. That was nice. It was also nice to see there was some effort in getting Iris, Caitlin, Cecile, etc. in scenes with other women as well. Some more success than others in different situations, but E for effort. Stormy asked if Iris even went to Oliver's funeral. I do not believe she did. And some comments in the chat about, likewise, as Carey said, feeling sorry for Candace because the writing does Iris no favors. It's just, yeah, I just have to feel sorry for her at this point. I love a good anti-hero. I love a good difficult woman. This is not what they're trying to do. But
here's a question I would ask you.
Yeah.
We've had this 5-episode Armageddon, right? The question is, where does this show go for the rest of the season? Because we're sort of stuck with status quo, right? It's
right.
Like, hey, we did all that fun stuff. We brought in some interesting characters, and now sort of here we are. I guess really the only thing that piques my interest going forward for the rest of the season is if, when Barry reset the quote unquote negative flashpoint, were there any ripples? They don't have to be dastardly ripples, right? But were there any ripples that are going to be significant to the narrative, to the story going forward? I think we may, but at the end of the day, I really think that's really the only nugget that we have going forward for the rest of the season for what this 5 episode arc was supposed to be. And that has to be a little bit disappointing if this thing wasn't a total foundation shake for what the rest of the season is supposed to be.
That's a really good question. I think the things that have changed, and let me know if I'm missing anything. One, we've established that Nora and Bart can kind of like come and go as they please. And there's kind of a hint there at the end that there's some ripple effect that put them back in there. And maybe, the promo from there on out indicates they're trying to mess with the timeline. So that I know was a question you and I discussed like after the first episode. We weren't really sure what happened with them. Apparently, they can come and go. Two, we've air quotes established Barry is definitely a hero and not a villain who's going to cause the end of the world. And that feels like a direct response to my campaign for Barry to be seen as a villain. And I'm just going to say that I will not give up the good fight. And I still think he's a villain, but I really appreciate the effort that was put into 5 episodes directly to convince me specifically about me. Third thing, we now know, I don't want to say more, but we know a little bit more about all of the side characters who are making up the new Team Flash. Going into this, Chuck, Allegra, etc., were still somewhat new, and now we've seen them work together a bit more in a way where it's not weird if it's like an episode that has mostly them and not as much Barry. But maybe that's just wishful thinking because I don't need episodes with as much Barry. Those are the things that I think have changed, and some of it's just like mild forward momentum. What do you think?
The really sort of interesting thing that I am sort of looking forward to going ahead, and again, I don't know if it was the result of the ripple, but in the promo that we got, there was what's it called? Eddie Thawne, right? I think that was his name. So apparently he's around. So the question is, if he's back somehow, that obviously reestablishes the Thawne bloodline, which means that obviously Eobard, even though he's still alive and without his powers in prison, we know he's going to pop up somehow through some sort of machination. So I'm interested to see how that all plays into each other. And then I think, without spoiling anything, if you don't like spoilers, hold your
I
ears for
love
like the next 10
spoilers.
seconds. But essentially, Ronnie is supposed to be back in some sort of form or fashion, right? So if nothing else, that hopefully means that Caitlin will be more front and center when that happens, which is obviously good news if you're a fan of The Flash. So those two things are things that I would be interested in if I was a fan of the show and someone said, "Hey, after Armageddon, why would you continue to watch?" And those two things would be reasons why I would continue to watch. I haven't made that decision yet, to be honest with you.
I'm going to continue to watch. I already know. I do, like I like to complain about it a lot, but I do enjoy several of the side characters. Caitlin, Frost. I've been enjoying Chuck and Allegra. I think that's very cute and cheesy and nerdy, but I love a good nerd and nerd pairing. I think that's always fun. So I will continue to watch, but I am excited for Ronnie to return. With Eddie returning, I'm just so gun shy of anything that I feel like is going to put Iris in another position to have to prop up Barry. And I just know that's going to create some sort of storyline where it's like, oh, it's your ex-fiance. So we need to stroke Barry's ego for like 1 to 2 episodes to make sure he's not jealous about it. And I already want to be like, oh my God, stop. But,
I don't know. Eddie might say something to Iris that triggers her to love him again the same way that Barry said something to her in the reverse timeline that got her to love Barry again. So she might leave Barry, go with Eddie, and you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Honestly, good for her. She deserves that. She's done her time with Barry. She's more than served a sentence. Whatever dislike anybody has for her, you cannot believe that she's done bad enough to deserve to have to stay with Barry for this long. Like she's if she seems irritable, she's justified at this point.
So last thing I wanted to mention, and I promise this is the very last thing I wanted to mention. I wonder if you
You're good.
cringed as much as I did. But when there was a mention about, I forget the kid's name, Nora and what's the other one's name?
Bart.
The Flash. Yeah. So when there was sort of this mention of like, hey, maybe you could hang out, when they were talking to Mia, it's like, maybe you could hang out with those two. And I was like, no, you better not pair Mia with those freaking losers, man. That better never come to fruition.
For lack of a better way to say this, she she comes across as so much cooler than them. It's almost hard to picture them hanging out. And I just like I don't mean that in a bad way. I actually find Nora and Bart somewhat amusing. They're kind of cute. I don't have a real problem with them in the grand scheme of the Flash. But they barely feel like they're on the same show as Mia, and they seem like kind of dorky little kids that she might have babysat at one point, and they think that she's just this like really cool, suave, street smart babysitter, and they may fantasize about being cool enough to hang out with her, but they've never been cool enough to hang out with her. That's what it feels like. Where it's like, oh, you're cute. Oh yeah, we should totally get a drink sometime, and then like she never texts them back. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Which is strange because the actress that plays Nora is older than almost everyone on the show, but
Oh
that's
yeah.
neither here nor there.
Yeah. And I don't even think that she looks like a child, by the way. Like, they dress her like a child, but if you've seen her, like off screen, she is a drop dead gorgeous woman who looks like a woman. Don't get me wrong, but like the character Nora, looks aside,
Yeah.
comes across as, just like a little less cool and street smart than Mia. Well, speaking of Nora needing to, come of age, I want to transition us to a commercial break with Kate, where she's going to talk to us about a coming of age movie. We're going to have a little bit of a pitch here for a movie that Kate thinks you all should see over Christmas. So, Kate, take it away.
Wow, what an amazing segue. Thank you. So, Licorice Pizza will be coming out on Christmas. It's already out for limited release now, but I don't have access to those places yet to watch it already. But I will be watching it pretty much as soon as it comes out, like full release, Christmas Day. It stars Alana Haim and a couple other big name actors as well as some newcomers. Alana is a member of a rock band named Haim. She's the youngest sister in that group, and this is her first acting role. A little backstory about the movie: it's directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, and it was essentially written for Alana Haim because Paul Thomas Anderson was a student of Alana's mother in school, and it's actually slightly based off of that experience in high school, I think it was. Um, and because of all those connections, it was very much written for Alana to play the role, and all of her family, her mom and dad, and her sisters all play roles in this movie, which is hilarious and fantastic. She was on Jimmy Fallon last night, so if you have any other interest or like want to see a really good clip, I recommend go watch that interview. They also did a little bit with the musical bit of the night last night, so that was funny. And I will also say that if you don't want to take my word for it and you want to take professional critics' word for it, I don't know. She is winning a lot of awards for this role. So she has been nominated for, I believe it is 6 different Best Actresses or Breakthrough Performances in this award season, and has already won, I believe, 3 of them, and is still waiting 2 others. So I mean, she is really getting the street cred. She is doing so well, and I, as a many years fan of Haim as a band and as just their personalities, I love them. I am very proud of my girl Holana.
That was a fantastic pitch. I've watched the trailer. I think I've listened to multiple songs from the soundtrack. I am very excited about this movie. I know it was like made for Kate. So that was your pre holiday pitch for Licorice Pizza, just
Mm-hmm.
in case you don't want to instead watch the 5 episode crossover event entitled Armageddon over Christmas. I hear Licorice Pizza might be a little better. Now, Kate, as you probably observed, I did a little bit different format over the Flash discussion where rather than just kind of having my own questions, I pulled from some of the tweets that I received during the live stream event, the live event, as it
Mm-hmm.
were, of, you know, Mr. Flash. With Hawkeye, I also received a few thoughts. First of all, one from Carey. So let's pull Carey on here. There we go. Carey, you mentioned that the only thing that could have made this week's episode of Hawkeye better would be the dog. So, does that mean you would say this latest episode of Hawkeye was a 10 out of 10? Am I putting words in your mouth?
No, if I could give it an 11 out of 10, I probably would. The way it started, it I don't know if I want to say it's flawless, but it was pretty darn close.
And now, Kate, I'm going to quote you directly. You told
Okay.
me at the point that you were only halfway through the episode, in all caps, if you can believe all caps,
Mm-hmm.
coming from Calm Kate herself, she says,
Mm-hmm.
OMG, this is some of the best TV I've watched in months. And then follow through about 28 minutes later, she says, and that statement carries all the way through the episode. So, Kate, would you rate this episode a 10 out of 10?
I mean, I have to agree with Carrie. It's not flawless, but it is definitely a 10 out of 10 episode. It is some of the best TV I have watched all year. Only topped for me by WandaVision, but who is shocked by that statement?
Shock.
So, if shock, the only thing better is WandaVision? What?
Okay, so here's my question for you guys. I've already said what my favorite scene is on Twitter. And don't you worry, I'm going to bring it up again tonight. What was your favorite scene from the episode?
Carrie, you want to go first?
Kate, you go first. Kate, go first.
I go first. I'll go first. So my favorite scene was most definitely the scene where they're eating mac and cheese and talking about like the concept of being a hero, because it's something as people who watch a ton of superhero shows, we've seen thousands of conversations about what it means to be a hero and is this person a hero, whatever. But this is probably, as weird as it was, they were on polar opposite sides, one of the most nuanced demonstrations of how people can view heroes. Because while I agreed with Yelena that it was to be a true hero, you have to be more defined by your actions. That being titled a hero does not make you a hero, and that if you skew too far away from what that's supposed to be, then you are no longer a hero. But then I also understood that from Kate's perspective of the nobody's perfect, everybody tries their best, people make mistakes, even if they are a hero, and that most of the best heroes are just human, and that it's a very humanized approach to heroism, and that even though hers is a very naive and innocent perspective, she and doesn't know half of what happened. She probably knows more and more accurately what happened on the edge cliff with Natasha. And when we finally see Yelena figure all that out, it'll be really interesting to see how her perspective on that changes.
Yeah, I will say this. That was certainly easy. My favorite scene, but I know it was probably everyone's favorite scene, so I'll go a little bit different than that. It was a scene when Yelena and the other former widow went to go and I guess deprogram
Mm-hmm.
the woman that they thought was a widow. And it was after they had basically, sat down and had a conversation. And you could see the moments when they were zooming in on Yelena's face when they were starting to talk about, what she's going to go do now. And she gets to go hang out with Natasha in New York. And then you could just see this look on her face that tells you, or at least told you, how important that would be to her because that's her family and it meant something. And there was that moment where she sort of sat back a little bit and had that realization. And then she goes and gets up and goes to the bathroom to wash her hands, and she gets freaking dusted, man. And and I should have seen that coming when they had like the year on the screen before the scene took place. But seeing that, it was sort of a visceral reaction to me because it was like I was going through it as if it was happening, and I felt that impact. And then for her to come back 5 years later and know that she missed that and what that meant to her and the impact that that would have on her and and just sort of seeing that through her facial expressions and that sort of thing without having it was just it was powerful to me to see that and it sort of um, helps people, I guess, understand what her view would be in terms of this mission that she's on now to try to figure out a way, not necessarily to get back what she lost, but there has to be a price that someone has to pay for that, right? And whoever that might be, you could just sort of see that um, in just sort of like the quietness of that scene, but also in sort of like the conversation that she had with that former widow right after, and you could just see it was a lot. It was a lot. And so that was probably one of my favorite scenes, other than obviously the mac and cheese scene.
The mac and cheese scene, you're absolutely right. That was my favorite. I think that was everybody's favorite. I love the one you're picking, though, where you're seeing that emotion on her face, particularly because Yelena is a character that is she emotes a lot, but she doesn't wear her heart on her sleeve. So she will be, she will communicate through facial expressions and she'll light up at the idea of going to the, Empire State Building or whatever. But she does try to put up a wall. She is a trained widow. She does try to put up a wall when it comes to difficult emotions. So to see that come through definitely resonates. And it's impressive that they're able to do that in such a short amount of time. And to Kate's point about this discussion of heroism, like it's the mac and cheese scene, it's hilarious. I would watch it just for the comedic value as well. But there is something we said, especially following our criticisms or my criticisms of the Flash these last, few minutes about not communicating a clear heroic perspective for Barry because he doesn't have a heroic perspective. And yet they're able to bring in this fairly new character, new to the show, and have her communicate what heroism means to her and the standard that she's holding Clint to, and communicate that to another hero. And it's this complex situation because Kate, Clint, and Yelena all have different heroic perspectives, but they all have heroic perspectives. So the fact that they're able to communicate that while still giving her time to add hot sauce to her mac and cheese, in contrast to Kate Bishop not wanting hot sauce on her mac and cheese, immaculate, 10 out of 10, fabulous episode. I really want to watch it over and over again, and I'm not even a rewatcher type of person. But I know we're running short on time, but Carey, if you'll allow me, I want to touch on something you brought up last week, which is that Kingpin is coming. And you were right. So, what did you think of the villainous reveals in this episode? And I'll have you know that that ties into another tweet I received about this episode. Ken says, "Who are you kidding?" about my favorite episode or my favorite scene being the mac and cheese. We all know you love the evil mom reveal the most. And I did love the evil mom reveal as well. So, what did you think about being right?
Well, I think the Kingpin reveal or that was sort of telegraphed a long time ago, probably from the very start. Um, and I think obviously we started to see the turn, I guess, is for lack of a better phrase, of Eleanor. I think we sort of saw a little bit of that coming. What I think will, what I think will mean more to me in this very last episode that's coming up is on what sort of playing field is she a villain compared to Kingpin?
Mm-hmm.
Are they are they some sort of equals to any degree? Is she quote unquote just sort of like a lieutenant somewhere? Does she have her own motivations, her own sort of goals and agenda and that sort of thing, or is she just along for the ride? I hope that it's more of a situation where she has her own agenda, her own goals, and sort of is her own woman as opposed to, okay, Kingpin, what do you want me to do this week?
Kate, do you have any theories on that?
Well, I mean, if you'll remember, I said she was going to be the Mora Queen of this show, and I'm sorry, but was I right?
Kate was very right as well. Yes.
Well, and I was just so excited. Like, I hate it for Kate. Inception there a little bit. I hate it for Kate Bishop that what's about to happen. But I full and well know that we're about to get a very much like Kingpin is the guy in charge, but Eleanor is also a woman that cannot be told what to do. So whether how much uh like how powerful and how dangerous Kingpin is, especially for Eleanor's own personal safety, is to be discovered. But I do not think that she will be completely subservient to him in any way. I think she will very much act as, if not truly be in control, act as if she has more control of the situation than she truly does. And that whether that spells her downfall or at least gets her arrested, that is something to find out.
Very
The
well summed
so
up. Okay,
I
one
guess the
last.
only thing,
Oh,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, you
No,
go.
the only thing I would want to add quickly is Echo, right? It was sort of nice to see that she was beginning to sort of unravel sort of like what happened to her dad. And obviously, I think that will play a role in her own show that's coming up. But it was sort of nice to see that layer too.
I'm very excited about that. There's no side character in this that I dislike, which is really nice and really unusual. If you'll allow me one last question for you guys, and we can make it a quick one, but I'm just curious since we're not going to get a chance to discuss this finale, what are you most excited to see in the finale next week?
I
Kate, you
just
can go
really
first.
want more Kate and Yelena interactions. I love that scene.
And yeah, and I need to see a Yelena and Clint scene together, whether it's an action scene or whether they're sort of having it out in terms of their relationship um, to Natasha. I'm really interested in seeing that.
I completely agree. I'm very excited to potentially see Kate or to see Yelena interact with Clint, not necessarily in like an action scene sense, although I'll take them fighting as well. That's fine. We've discussed the fact that I'm okay with her killing him. I want to see them talk about Natasha a bit. I think they can bond a bit over her death, but I think it's very different for the two of them. And I think that will be highlighted in the conversation. So, this is a show where I trust them to discuss grief and dark topics, as we've seen grief and dark topics handled well on other Marvel shows. Yes, I'm talking about WandaVision. I can see the little Kate thumbnail on the sideline agreeing with me. Okay, thank you, Carey and Kate, for joining us. Let's go ahead and bring you out one last time. There you go. You may say bye. I want everybody to go find Carey and Kate on Twitter. Their information's in the description down below, and talk more with them about Marvel and DC stuff. And talk to Kate about WandaVision and upcoming Elizabeth Henstridge interactions with the DC universe. Talk to Carey about how great the current season of Legends is going. And you guys, thank you for joining me these last few weeks, whether it was painful or pleasant to discuss this whole Flash crossover. You all made it so much better.
Thank you for having me.
Oh,
Happy
anytime.
holidays.
It's my pleasure to give you crap every time.
Thank you so much, Kate. You guys have a wonderful holiday season, and I will see you in the new year, provided this universe lasts that long. Bye.